Perhaps over the years, you may have said, McMahon, you drive me crazy. How could you have possibly come up with something like that? Where did you go to school? I didn't. And that might not be much of a surprise either. As a matter of fact, my parents, who were actors, were on the road all the time, and I traveled with them. And my mom taught me at home. And that's one of the reasons why one of Pat's personal portraits had to be how it is that homeschooling can send you to Harvard as a result of Brian Rosta's school, called the Arizona Connections Academy. Do you call it a virtual school?
We do. Absolutely.
But is it just simply another one of those online schools? To tell you the truth, when I talked to you about this, that was what I was concerned about, because everybody seems to have online education.
Well, Pat, here's the way I explain it to the masses. I have a 16-year-old myself who attends Gilbert High, a typical brick and mortar, large school, public school district here in Arizona. He gets up in the morning. We drive him to school. He's 16, but we're still driving him. He walks into a classroom, has a teacher there that lectures, sometimes some interaction, gets up, walks to his next class, same experience, takes some tests, gets some homework, and comes home. A student at my school wakes up whenever they wake up, whether it be an early riser, or maybe they go race their horse in the morning, or they have singing lessons, or they're just someone who likes to sleep until 11.
You're making it sound more attractive all the time, Brian.
Well, it is quite a unique new concept, and not so new as we were discussing earlier.
But they wake up.
They do wake up, and they go to their first class online. They go to an equivalent of a website. We call it a live lesson, where there's a whiteboard. They're in there with other students in that class. They have a teacher who talks to them. They have a headphone with a microphone connected to it. They have a webcam in many cases where they're looking at the teacher. They're watching the whiteboard. They're learning the lesson for the day. They can virtually raise their hand just by clicking a button. The teacher can answer their questions. They can submit information. The teacher can give them the ability to move their mouse and actually write on the board themselves. And then instead of getting up and going to their next class, they simply are in many cases finished for the day after one or two of these live lessons. They have assignments they do online. Then they go to their next class, depending on what age they are. If we're a K through 12, so high school is more like a high school setup. Third grade is more like third grade with one teacher.
But I was an actor's kid, so my parents were either going to send me to a relative to stay and go to the same school, or I was going to get a chance to travel the world with them, which is kind of an education in itself, and I was going to have what they called at that time correspondence school. So that's my story. But who attends your school?
Well, and it used to be, and when I say used to be, 5, 8 years ago,
yeah.
I ask you, when you were doing correspondence, if you were now, was there anywhere that you would have been that you wouldn't have had an internet connection? You see Wi-Fi everywhere. Every McDonald's has it, Starbucks, or libraries, anything like that. Anywhere where a student can get online, they can go to class. And so in this situation now, 5 to 8, 10 years ago, the students that came to online schools were students that needed the flexibility. They were star athletes or entertainers, or the brick and mortar setting wasn't appropriate for them. They were bullied, or they had a medical condition. What we've seen happen, especially in the last 2 or 3 years, is suddenly virtual schooling has become very attractive to mainstream students, where suddenly students who typically would be going immediately to the brick and mortars, whether it be budget restraints, the districts aren't as strong in some areas, they suddenly look online and they see they're able to get a quality, customized education that they can receive pretty much anywhere that they are.
Yeah, but if I want to go to the prom, I have to go with my sister out in the living room.
Not this year, at least not at our school. We had some students actually get together and say, we'd like to run a prom. Now, obviously, we service the entire state.
Is that right?
So the question becomes, how do you run a prom where a student in Yuma might be attending with a student that they met online from Phoenix or someone in Tucson? This year, we're actually going to be running 2 proms. We'll have one in the Phoenix area and one down in the Tucson area, and we expect to have 50 to 100 students attending both.
Yeah, wow. That means I could have gotten a date in Winslow. There's all kinds of possibilities. All right, listen, very quickly, because we have to digest something as complex as this virtual school, K through 12, that is available to everybody, or do I or do I have to achieve some level of success already?
No, we are a public school, so we are available to everybody.
Well, wait a minute. Does that mean then that I don't have to buy that electronic equipment that you're talking about?
Well, I always tell folks when they ask, one of the big questions is, what does it cost? What
Yeah.
are we going to have to pay? And you know, and as I've shared, one of my teachers likes to say that Arizona Connections Academy is the cost of a tomato.
What do you mean?
And I always said to her, why do you say the cost of a tomato? And she said, I've been teaching in this setting for 8 years, and there was only one time that we asked students to pay for something, and she said it was a science lab where they had to do something with a tomato. And she said, unfortunately, you all are going to have to go purchase a tomato. So approximately 50 cents is about the, I joke, but if you were to enroll in my school, you would go on and you would fill out all the paperwork that you would for any school, brick and mortar, virtual, what have you. Birth certificate, proof of residency in Arizona,
Yeah.
because we are an Arizona public school. And about a week later, you would receive at your doorstep a couple of large boxes. One would have in it a desktop computer, flat screen monitor, keyboard, mouse, headphone set, a webcam, all the textbooks that any student would typically use. Many of the textbooks are also available online, but many students prefer to have the physical book in their hand that they can study from, and it's also more mobile than having your computer everywhere. Lab kits, so if you're taking, say, a science class and it requires doing something with different manipulatives or things like that, that's all provided. Art equipment, anything that's...
All for free.
All for free.
Because it's a charter school.
But it is public.
And that's what goes along, right? Okay, now listen, all I'm telling you right now, Brian, is that it just sounds almost too good to be true, but I know it's true because that's kind of what I did without the fancy stuff. Mm-hmm. Before we have to say goodbye, and before some folks perhaps say hello for the first time to Arizona Connections Academy, just simply let me ask you to take that Harvard thing that I used as an example and pursue that, and just give me a couple of additional schools where you have sent kids who went to your school.
Well, I know that we've had students attend NYU. We've had a student that has attended West Point, which is very exciting because there were a lot of questions about the military, in fact, accepting students from virtual academies. And in all those cases, what you have schools that, for a lot of times, this is their first experience with virtual schools, and they want to make sure that you're credited and you're an actual institution. They start looking at our curriculum, and they look at that we have AP courses and the same challenges that a student would have in a brick and mortar. And in fact, they walk away very satisfied that what they're receiving is a very well-rounded student.
It is in existence, not just in cyber ed, but in Gilbert and right here in the Valley of the Sun. All I can tell you is it's exciting for me because it gives families and kids themselves a whole lot of alternative choices. And that's one of the reasons why it is that I wanted you to meet Brian Rosta and Arizona Connections Academy as a part of this series on KTAR.com. And by the way, I dare you to tell your kids to watch this when it's on KTAR.com. They might find it very attractive.